At this point, it is a pleasure to invite the chair of our Havdalah and Special Programs Committee, Abraham Tesser, to introduce our special program this evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abraham Tesser. And tonight we have the privilege of hearing from two fabulous poets. Sabrina Orah works from home and homeschools her two boys. So perhaps it should be no surprise that motherhood and fairy tales inform her work. Misha-Cahnnman Taylor is professor of language and literacy and currently serves as Fulbright Ambassador alum, speaking worldwide about the power of poetry and theater in teaching languages. Both our poets are prolific writers and both enjoy international acclaim. And I am proud to say they are both members of CCI. The work of poets often makes us feel that they have a special sensitivity to the world around us. They are often able to affect our senses, thoughts, and feelings with their words alone. Tonight, we're asking Misha and Sabrina to use their work to help us think about several issues. I'll raise an issue and ask one of our poets to address the issue using her own poetry or prose. I am also in the unenviable position of trying to manage time. So if I cut in with a prompt to speed up or finish, I hope our speakers will forgive me. I think this will be fun for them, and I'm sure it's going to be fun for us. So let's get started. Sabrina, in our Havdalah service, we have marked the end of the Sabbath and prayed for a good week. This week we celebrate Thanksgiving, and there's much to be grateful for. But the pandemic changes things. It casts a pall. Does your work reflect or confront this kind of mixed bag that is so often the stuff of life?
Thank you. That's just such a beautiful question. And I've been thinking about this so much, this idea of brokenness as also a kind of light, which I feel like in Judaism, we know very well, brokenness as a kind of light. And there's a phase in Jewish mysticism called Tzimtzum, which I've been thinking about a lot these days, which is basically in order for God to affect creation, God needs to depart from the world. In order for the world to come into being, God needs to depart from the world. But right before God departs from the world, God stuffs God's light into these vessels, but the vessels break and shatter and light is scattered everywhere. And we're sort of like in the realm of all of this broken light, which feels very palpable these days. And I'm just going to read just 2 pages of the beginning of an essay I wrote about brokenness as a kind of possible light. It's called You Break It, We Fix It, and I'll just read the first 2 pages. I am inside, you break it, we fix it, holding my son's shattered iPad. Hello, I call out, no one answers. The counter glows white and the walls are empty. Hello, hello. I wait a few minutes before calling out again. 1 minute, says a raspy voice from the back of the store. Hope swells in my chest. Here we comes, we will fix it. A man in rumpled clothes emerges. I put the shattered iPad on the counter. Don't put it there, we says. I quickly lift it off the counter. We sprays sanitizer on the spot I touched and wipes it dry with a paper towel. I hold up the broken screen so we can see it, and a little shard of glass drops to the floor with a plink. Yeah, no, we says. Yeah, no, what? I ask. We says the soldering work required would cost more than a new iPad. We says it would take weeks, possibly months. To be sure, we asks me to read the serial number off the back of the iPad. I read the numbers and we silently types them into a computer. Yeah, we says, it isn't worth it. I just stand there. But if I break it, it says we fix it. I point to the sign that is the name of the store. Even if we has to send it far, far away, even if it takes the handiwork of 100 mothers with long white beards and God inside their fingertips, we should fix it. We promised. Even if all we ever do is just try to fix it, we should try. But the man is gone. He has already disappeared into the back of the store. The next week, I return to You Break It, We Fix It with a whole entire country. It's heavy, but I managed to carry it through the parking lot, leaving behind a trail of seeds and the crisp scent of democracy and something that smells like blood or dirt. Across it is a growing crack. A child too young to be alone is out in front holding a broken country too. Store's gone out of business, says the child. I shift the country to one arm and try to peer in, but it's shuttered and dark. Told you, says the child. Out of business, I text my husband. You Break It, We Fix It is closed. I've come here for nothing again. When I look up, the whole parking lot is full of children holding countries. Is this You Break It, We Fix It, they ask. It once was, says the first child, but now it's closed. The children hold their countries closer like a doll or an animal. I want to drive them all home, but they're all holding countries and there are far too many of them. I'm sorry, I say too quietly for any of the children to hear. I don't ask them where their mothers are or how they got here or how they will get home. Instead, I walk quickly back to my car. A little shard of glass falls out of my country with a plink. I pick the shard up and hold it to the sunlight. A rainbow just for a second falls over the children. Plink, plink, plink. Shards of glass are falling out of the children's countries too. It sounds like an ice storm, but the sky is blue and the children are dry as bones. I don't want to stay to see what happens next. I drive away. I leave the children cradling their broken countries. I have no idea where any of them live or how to fix anything or what to do with the shard of glass. At a red light, I put the shard in the glove compartment and forget about it for days. In Exodus, the first set of 10 commandments is not buried, but placed in the Aron HaKodesh beside the new unbroken tablets, which the Jews carry through the wilderness for 40 years. I imagine the broken tablets leaning against the unbroken ones, telling them secrets only broken things know. I imagine the weight of the broken tablets and the heat and the thirst and the frustration. Why didn't we just leave the broken tablets behind? What good is all this carrying? To know your history is to carry all your pieces, whole and shattered, through the wilderness and feel their weight. Thank you.
I need to catch my. I need to catch my breath before I call on Misha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Misha, I wonder how. Are you there, Misha?
Yeah.
Ah, good. I wonder how your work addresses the way we should understand or come to grips with the kind of widespread adversity associated with COVID. Even on Thanksgiving, as we consciously celebrate the things for which we are grateful.
Wow. Yeah, I'm still sitting with the broken pieces. Oh my God, Sabrina, I am so I feel so lucky to share a stage with this goddess of literature that we live among. And Abe is such a talented artist, so I just am happy to be here. COVID for me has started a new seeing. All the lockdown and the restrictions has helped me see my backyard differently, my community differently, and of course the confluence of the ecological and health disaster and the Black Lives Matter movement and the brutality of the police coming to light in our government. There's just so many juxtapositions happening. And right before COVID, I had the opportunity to go to Georgia Tech, where they have a wonderful poetry program. And I got to hear from a poet named Kaveh Akbar, and he did a presentation on Kulichev. And so because it's maybe a little much to grasp, I put some images in as sort of footholds for you to see as I read this complicated poem for the first time out loud. It's in 5 parts, and I think it speaks to the contradictions and the tensions of this time. It's a new poem. Kulichev Effect 2020. 1. Kulichev's theory proved that a film is just the juxtaposition of 2 shots sewn together to create emotions and manipulate the audience's reaction to each of them. A face flashed to the snowstorm's urgent joy in Georgia. Each snowman, brown and ashy, lingered on 2 green January lawns. One's red camellia eyes and buttons bled a petal skirt at its feet. What else could a snowman do when stuck in mud? Same as green lawns when there's no snowmen. Same as schools later in March when there's no bodies, more or less the color of cloud, coffee, earth, egg. Wait for things to change. 2. We are ready to adapt, and we are ready to do whatever we have to do as the disease spreads, if it spreads. Trump, March 2020. If, when, never simple, simpleton says we can't we our way home. Stop seeing a mirror in rear view mirrors where persons in charge are taking care of taking care. Of what does a face know? Depends if that face looks back to see those in history's backseat look all the same. 3. The discovery stunned me, Kulichev wrote. So convinced was I of the enormous power of montage. Like a mother goose looks back, the poets too review what or who could be missing. The internet makes the search easy to see whiteness next to my own recent writing about we. Flash further back to pay attention. How reading Wallace Stevens changes once I learn he asked, "Who's the coon?" upon seeing a photo of his book award nominator, Gwendolyn Brooks, in 1952. How like the snowman in his poem to extol a mind of winter and miss the distant glitter, too white to think of any misery in the sound of the wind. 4. When Hiroshima was destroyed by the atomic bomb in 1945, it is said the first living thing to emerge from the blasted landscape was a matsutake mushroom. Anna Singh. Oops, sorry. Who I'm next to makes a difference in July when picking chanterelle mushrooms. My friend getting a PhD in science education harvests golden spores closer to the trail. Her brown skin blends with the forest, and she is less afraid of spiders. It can take decades for a colony to produce enough fruiting bodies for a taco. It's taken us 7 months to plan this date on loose soil. It took less than 30 seconds for a grumbling white man to destroy our joy. Entangled in webs, he shouted at her first. "You're ruining the mushrooms," he yelled. He'd seen more of us out there, unlawful thieves on state property. This bringer of snow, an otherwise melting day. I saw terror in my friend's eyes. I'd brought us there, supposed myself a guide. 5. Kulichev edited a close-up of an expressionless man, Tsarist silent film actor Ivan Moschkin. The black and white man, not smiling, not unsmiling, with 3 alternate endings. What I'm saying is all an experiment against what's already been said. The man's white, the man's doing well depending on what he's next to. A coffin, a bowl of soup, another woman, white, naked on a divan. Sorrow, hunger, lust, depending on the experiment, we hear the urgent sound rising from empty bleachers as wind.
Bravo. Bravo. I must say to both of our poets, it's hard for me to move on, but I will. Misha, your work in teaching English as a second language has had the happy consequence of exposing you to a variety of languages and cultures. For most educated people, such exposure is an unmitigated plus. Is that reaction always justified? Has your multicultural life ever made your writing more difficult?
Yes. I think it's the more languages, the better. I think not everything difficult is a bonus in the arts. Any struggle, any trial, if you have the arts to filter it, it makes it richer. And it's I recently had an experience which is so marvelous and strange, where a woman in Germany is doing her PhD on the choice to flee or the forced exile from Germany of people in Munich. And my family was one of the 4 families of her dissertation focus. And I didn't know that my family had left Germany right before Kristallnacht. And so thus is the government of the German government sees that as the choice to leave Germany, and thus none of the compensations come, you know, all the things that they're doing. But there is an effort to put a plaque on my family home in Munich. And it got me thinking about language. I have a very good friend at UGA who teaches German. And I ask her how much she teaches about the Holocaust. You know, how do you teach a language where that's so riddled with complexity and terror, and how do the ancestors grapple with the languages of their oppressor? So I'm going to just share this screen because sometimes I find poems are hard to hear one time. And this is a new poem. It's just published in a journal called Vox Populi, and I'm really excited about that. It's called Gesundheit. The way this strange non-English wish commuted in a grandmother's Yiddish mouth, sei gesund, upon leave-taking, go in good health, or with an edge, oh, you think selling those combs to your friends will make you rich? Sei gesund, good health to you. Implicitly, you fool. Hear these queer syllables confusing zay for gay, laughing when the old lady takes a zip of her coke. So foreign, like the old man so thick with meanness, his father Sigwart on the wall, with great aunts and uncles. Who got out? It's a risk to say anything these days. A club of greedy orders filling filthy, peppery mouths. Even noodle, that simple word away from death, sounded authentic in foreign language class where they memorized declension charts, including die, to know who is doing what to whom.
I don't know that I'm going to get through this whole section. Sabrina, I'd like to ask you something that's particular to your work. Your recent work is liberally salted with allusions to fairy tales. Those allusions help to illustrate the kind of impossible or at least ironic situations we often find ourselves in. Can you comment on your interest in fairy tales and how they drive or facilitate your work?
I just want to say, Misha, I just absolutely love everything you just read. It was so beautiful. And I love how you mix like the ha always with the horror, um, which I think is a mark of some very good writing and good Jewish writing too. um, but in terms of fairy tales, I think, you know, what happened was that um, I started finding that I could find these figures in fairy tales to hold on to, almost like these little life rafts, so that I can tell the stories that I was otherwise feeling like I couldn't tell. So I would, you know, I had been wanting for a long time to write about being a stepmother, and I couldn't write about it until like I had the evil stepmother of fairy tales beside me. And there's something about being beside that evil stepmother that gave me the guts to sort of explore. And I have felt often that there's something about fairy tales, and I feel this also with the Torah, and I think there's a lot, you know, a lot of overlap in not only in terms of sort of like miracles and journeys, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of these sort of stories that act as a kind of like manna, you know, like a kind of bread, and you can eat them and get the taste you need from them. So I'm going to read just the first 2 pages of another essay I wrote called "Sorry, Peter Pan, We're Over You," about my son wanting to dress up as Peter Pan for Halloween. And then at the last minute, changing his costume and sort of having that moment as a mother of being like, oh no, now what, here we go. But also the complexity of what he wanted to end up dressing up as and what he wanted to leave behind. So I'll just read the first 2 pages. On the day before Halloween, my son's teacher tells me with the seriousness of a funeral director that Noah has decided he does not want to be Peter Pan after all. Noah stands close beside her and he is dead serious too, as if after she breaks the news, he will be the one to show me the pine box where Peter Pan now sleeps. The furrow in Noah's brow deepens, and I imagine planting in it ranunculus, heliotrope, chrysanthemum, flowers we can pick to take with us when we pay our respects to the boy he has chosen not to be. His teacher speaks in a hush. He's decided instead, she says. Shit, I think. Unlike Wendy Darling, who can sew shadows onto the foot of a boy who will never grow up, I can't sew. But weeks before, I had ordered the whole costume from Etsy, the green felt hat, the quiver and arrows, the tunic, the brown sash, the green tights, and now, at the last minute, a costume change. Instead, she says, oh God, what I think. Instead, she says, her voice growing dim, he would like to be Martin Luther King Jr. I can't say no. I mean, I could say no, but then I would be the mother who told her son who wanted to be Martin Luther King Jr. that he must be Peter Pan instead. What am I supposed to say? You can't be Martin Luther King Jr. I already bought the green tights. Or I prefer you imagine yourself as a very, very, very old boy than as the most visible leader of the civil rights movement. I was cornered. It was already 3 o'clock. I needed a black suit. I could draw the mustache on with eyeliner. I needed black shoes, a white button-down shirt. I dropped Noah home and ran off to Target. I passed the girls' department and a t-shirt flashes at me. The future is female. Sorry, Nibs, Toodles, Slightly, Curly, Twin 1 and Twin 2. Sorry, John and Michael. Sorry, my sons. The future is female. Sorry, Peter Pan. We're over you. I think a lot about boys, about raising mine to be sensitive and effective and strange and lovely and kind and funny and brave. I want them to be boys who keep their shadows on and who belong to a future. Boys who understand the difference between a thimble and a kiss. Worry picks at me like Hook's metal claw. I want their boyness to bloom. I want to keep them safe. Some idiot kid, says my mother, probably told Noah he can't be Peter Pan because Noah is black and Peter Pan is white, so he figures his only other choice is to be MLK. No, no, I say. Trust me, says my mother. I know how this stupid world works. My mother is no Mrs. Darling. She is no Victorian. She knows children can be as innocent as they can be heartless. I sensed she didn't approve of the story from beginning to end. I wasn't sure if I approved either. There is frankly something chilling about sending a 7-year-old out into the world dressed like a great man in a stiff black suit who was shot in the neck at the age of 39. On the other hand, it's Halloween, and this whole southern town I live in is riddled with ghosts. So what's one more? Plus, it's no more chilling than sending your son out into the world dressed like a boy who at the end of the story can't even remember the fairy who drank the poison meant for him, or like the boy who tries to stick his shadow back on with soap and then takes credit for successfully sewing his shadow to his foot when everyone knows it was Wendy who did it with her housewife cleverness. God, I hate Halloween. As I walk Noah to his classroom, the other mothers smile at him sweetly, maybe a little too sweetly. My husband suggests he carry a Bible. We decide instead he carry a rolled up piece of green construction paper that says on the outside, I had a dream. I'll just be an owl, says my 5-year-old Eli. Thank you, I say.
Bravo. Sabrina, I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
Your Jewish identity is clear in your work. Does its inclusion reflect a conscious decision on your part, or does it simply reflect the direction in which the work wants to go, and you find yourself quite surprised when that aspect of your identity emerges?
Yeah, that's such an incredible question, and I'm just trying to find my notes.
If you liked it, I could ask it again.
Say it. Yeah, no. Here, I have it. Hold on. Yes. So I started writing this column for the Paris Review, and I had started writing it. I had actually originally, and it was all this column. All the essays were on fairy tales and motherhood, but the essay actually really started with with an essay that I wrote about Bruno Schulz. And the essay was very much about this Polish writer, Bruno Schulz, who had lived in Drohobych in Poland and had been killed during the Holocaust. And as a way for him to sort of keep himself alive, he had painted these fairy tales, these fairy tale images onto the walls of this SS officer's child's bedroom. And years and years and years later, these two Polish filmmakers went looking for these fairy tale images, for these fairy tale frescoes, and actually ended up finding them, came to this woman's house, and found this woman comes to the door, and she's completely, she has these thick glasses on, and she's practically like entirely blind, and she's living in this sort of poverty and misery, and she lets these filmmakers in, and you can see in this film this moment where these fairy tales start peering out from behind this whitewash. And it was in that moment where I thought to myself, that's what I want to do as a writer. Like, I want that kind of like collision of the past and the present. I want to, you know, you know, Judaism is both like, you know, my past, my present, and my future in many ways. Like, it is a kind of like collision of images that I'm often like sorting through, that helps kind of guide me through the world, even as it feels as though I'm wading through way more questions than I'm ever wading through answers. But I do really believe in sort of like the collision of the ancient and the future. There's this line by Carlos Levy that goes, the future has an ancient heart. And, you know, for me, you know, the sort of the ancient traditions like help guide my heart into a future that for me feels, you know, I mean, it's scary and mysterious and dangerous but also exciting. And so I'm just going to read, let's see. One second. Sorry, I thought I was more organized, and then. Okay, so I'm just going to read the first couple of pages of this essay, and it's on cracked fairy tales and the Holocaust. I wake up early so I can get to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, by 8 o'clock when it opens. I am in Jerusalem with my family, and I have only 1 hour because we are scheduled to go to the Kotel, where it will be so crowded that I will never get close enough to slip my prayer into the wall's ancient cracks. It is Passover. Everyone is rushing the wall as if God were impatient or actually there, and if there, then not there for long. Squeezed between too many bodies, I give up, walk back, and wait for my husband and my sons to emerge from the men's section with better luck. A week later, when I get home, I will leave my prayer inside a Hebrew copy of Bruno Schulz's The Strait of Crocodiles, also a holy ruin, a temple. Like most prayers, my prayer is for health. My son, Eli, who is 4 at the time, tells me that since I didn't get my prayer to the wall, it will never come true. And so I imagine a long, imminent plague, pleurisy and lice and fevers and damp bed sheets and thick rashes. But for now, it is 8 o'clock and I have only 1 hour. I leave my children with my husband because my children are too young to go to a Holocaust museum. We are all too young. We are all too old. When I get to Yad Vashem, I'm surprised I can just walk through the door without first swimming across a river of sour milk. What I've come to the Holocaust Museum to see are fairy tales, specifically the fairy tales that the Polish writer Bruno Schulz painted on the walls of a boy's nursery. The boy was the son of a Gestapo officer, Felix Landau, who offered Bruno Schulz protection in exchange for his art. I wonder what it smelled like in that bedroom as he painted: onions, blood, newspaper, fresh laundry. Shortly after the mural was complete, Karl Gunther, also a Nazi, shot and killed Bruno Schulz, who was walking home with a loaf of bread. This was 1942 in Drohobych, then part of Poland. The paintings are of Cinderella and Snow White, several shadowy figures, including two dwarves and a horse-drawn carriage. After the Holocaust, the figures receded like the dead, were painted over, and then were discovered again in 2001 by the documentary filmmaker Benjamin Geisler and his father. This discovery in the apartment of a woman in thick glasses that seem to endlessly fog begins as a hallelujah, as paint is carefully rubbed away to reveal faces, and ends in despair. As soon as the paintings are found in a tiny pantry behind onions and garlic and rose-colored paint, they are gone. 5 fragments are removed by a crew from Yad Vashem, allegedly without permission. The question as to who owns Bruno Schulz, Israel or Poland, rises as the dead might rise and wander wearily home, except there is no more home. More remains in the apartment, according to Geisler, but now it seems no one can get to it. The picture is destroyed, Geisler says, and nobody will know the whole picture. But for me, this is the least sad part of the story. What picture is ever whole? What good plot ever tells all its secrets? Panning back, I imagine the whole scene to be swarming with fairy tales. The mostly blind Polish lady, unknowingly living with dwarves and princesses behind her garlic, the Rumpelstiltskin deal, Bruno Schulz struck with a Nazi to spin straw into gold in order to stay alive, the monster Felix disguised as a man, and the poverty and the shadows and the staircases and the cupboards and the misery. When we say a story is like a fairy tale, what do we mean? Usually there is an evil stepmother, children on the verge of being eaten, spells, talking animals, forests, 3 wishes, 3 pasts, 3 sons, magic eggs or beans or cakes. Usually there is hunger and a dead mother. Usually there is a witch. We turn to fairy tales not to escape, but to go deeper into a terrain we've inherited, the vast and muddy terrain of the human psyche. Fairy tales, like glass coffins, like magic mirrors, give transparency to the reflection of the human gaze. Fairy tales are homemade stories turned inside out. You can see the threads, the stitching line, the seams. Sometimes a needle is still attached to a loose thread hanging. My mother pricked me once on the pinky with the needle. It's so you never tell a lie, she says. I hate liars. What about this story, I ask, about you pricking me with a needle on my pinky so that I never tell a lie? Isn't that a lie? There is a big difference between deceit, she explained, and using what is unreal to get to something even realer. And I'll stop there.
Marvelous, just marvelous. Misha, your Jewish identity is also clear in your work. How would you riff on a question of your identity as a Jewish poet?
Oh God, I'm still thinking about Yad Vashem and having an hour there.
Sorry.
How do you do, like, oh, I want to go back and see, I missed that exhibit. Anyway, Judaism is so fundamental to my work, and I didn't think so when I started as a poet. I was fascinated by my route to learning Spanish, and I have a book called Imperfect Tense about other people, other Americans trying to learn Spanish, and I really have come increasingly aware of how much seeking comfort in my own exile is about connecting to another language of exile. That Spanish is, for me, has been a kind of seeking that I didn't feel I was able to have as a child and a young adult to Judaism, but I'm finding that comfort now. And one thing that strikes me as particularly Jewish is humor. And it wasn't, it was so wonderful when I went to Tel Aviv and I went to the museum of Israel, I think it's called. I can't remember, but they have an exhibit there in 2017 on comedians and how they had a statistic that 75% of the comedians in the 70s in the US were Jewish. And I think a lot of times we find comedy a place of solace and repair. So I have 2 or 3 poems I'll read. I know we're coming to the end of time, but I'll start with this one. It's brand new. And I told my dad if he was here that he needed to know that not everything is true in poetry. So I'm telling you that because there's a lot of imagination and fiction. And so if he were here, which he's not, I would say, Dad, just go with it. So this is from a wedding I went to in Israel. It's not a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, but it has that sense of that elegance and grandeur of the like numerous tables, you know. My father met Jeff Goldblum at his second cousin's son's bar mitzvah. Riding his laugh from table 7 to table 48, then mingling, as my father tells it, at the dessert table, where white and blue chocolate dipped pretzels spelled the kid's name, and where you could dip light blue marshmallows into a white chocolate fountain, holding onto toothpicks topped with paper Israeli flags. No expense spared that night, connecting my father to someone famous for whom he was once mistaken in 1986, just after The Fly. And now a show with his own name, The World According to Jeff Goldblum. Like all the greats, Seinfeld, Jack Benny, Dick Van Dyke, not a Jew, but close to Reiner, whom my father says really made the show. He thinks his father saw Reiner with Jerry Stiller getting into a cab before Jerry and Ann had been. These sightings like winning horses, and their retelling like family. These underdogs who, like him, could map back to spit or fists, watered down chicken soup, and mean fathers. They could be distantly related, once removed, but close enough to see puffs of their breath in the cold. So that's my version of Judar, you know, that Jewish geography. It's so something, isn't it, that we want to be connected to people that are famous. And I think there's something about our mortality and our minority identity. We hunger to be known. And my dad really, really loves that kind of stuff. So this poem came from that museum. This is part of the exhibit. I'm here with my aunt who lives in Tel Aviv. And this was one part of the exhibit. And I wrestle with my own Judaism, that I'm not Jewish enough, maybe. I didn't marry, you know, I'm a mixed marriage. I don't go to the Friday services a lot. Sorry, I mean to raise a good Jewish children. But I just keep wondering, like, what do I have to do to be
You're
more
doing just fine, Misha. You're
yeah,
doing.
and so, you know, I have these Orthodox cousins, and so I'm always asking, am I really that? I'm not just asking that, but people have asked me. I don't know if that has happened to you guys, but one of my colleagues once said, you're not really that Jewish. And it got me thinking, am I really that Jewish? I'm melting like the last of the Goldbergs. I'm married to a gentle Gentile, putting up Christmas lights, humming, die, 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 with bacon in my mouth. The best, truth. If by Jewish you mean as gefilte fish after the second wine cup, or as zaftig as the balls in your soup, then ken, nachon, gay gesunter hate. I'm as Jewish as a shtetl of desserts on a bar mitzvah tray, exploding as forgotten challah dough in the refrigerator. I've toured more Catholic churches than most Marys. So when I write Jewish, I do it in English. I bargain for it, 2 for 1. I complain, 2 hot soup, then ask for a discount with ice cubes. I'd say yes, but have you spoken to my dead grandmother? She'd say I forgot to kiss the mezuzah, how I grabbed handfuls of tortilla chips on Passover. Leavened, unleavened, what's the big difference if we're all eating crackers, no? One of me stockings like yeshiva wives, ankles the color of mud, boiling chickens until scum rises, changing 10 babies' diapers. One of me snaps Scotch tape to wrap Christmas presents. Easy to avoid this question if you live in Manhattan, but I'm the northern spotted owl of Jews in Georgia. I remember my uncle's funeral in one of those cold cities where everyone clucks oi. Only the hired rabbi knew the Hebrew morning prayer. Not that I don't itch a little in those foreign words, but I'm shoving my children's head into them as if Hebrew school were one long turtleneck sweater. I'm worried about us. I'm worried about how cool it is to be nothing, to ride on the long elevator ascent to nihilism without anything to nosh on. I'm that level of Jew, cousin to worry, stuffing mince in my pocket. I'm a Horror dancing orphan of faith, or I'm a whoring prancer on a date on a lake. I'm a sound-alike, a wannabe, and almost was a heresy. That